Museum. This is the story of a couple who traveled to a province on the first morning, after leaving the hotel to find a place to visit. But the weather was not on their side as it started to rain immediately, making the wife upset from the start. The husband tried to speak frankly, saying there was nothing they could do about the rain. As they walked, they came across a stuffed museum, and with the rain showing no signs of stopping, they decided to go inside. Once inside, they encountered a ticket seller, and after purchasing tickets, the wife remarked that there was a strong smell inside, like garbage. The husband explained that it was probably the preservative used for the stuffed animals. The staff handed them 2 tickets and wished them an enjoyable visit. As they entered, they saw many stuffed animals of various species, from pigs, dogs, and chickens, to tigers, lions, kangaroos, and even koalas. The husband was excited by what he saw, but the wife said it looked strangely frightening, as if they were still alive and staring at her. The husband joked that maybe they were lurking, waiting for the right moment to attack humans like them. The wife said, "Don't say anything so scary," as she stared at a stuffed dog whose eyes seemed to be glaring at her with a frightening gaze. Suddenly, her husband jumped in and shook her while making dog sounds, to scare her. The wife was so startled that she screamed loudly amidst the laughter of her husband and the people around them. Feeling very upset, she immediately separated herself from him. That evening, the husband returned to the hotel, but the door to his room was locked. He tried knocking and called out to his wife, asking if she was still mad at him. Then he remembered that he had the room key, so he reached into his pocket to find it. But the key was missing. He retraced his steps back to the places he had been, ultimately arriving at the museum. It was getting late, and he thought it might be closed. But upon closer inspection, the entrance lights were still on. He decided to go in and encountered the ticket seller. He explained that he thought he had dropped his room key inside, and wanted to check. However, the ticket seller kept repeating, "Welcome, please enjoy your visit," in a monotonous tone. As the seller's voice began to change and lower, the husband became frightened and quickly ran away, only to encounter the security guard. Just as he was about to speak, a green light illuminated, revealing the guard's face, with bulging eyes that looked as if they were about to pop out. The skin was stitched and peeling, and the people who had been in the museum earlier appeared in a horrifying state. He was so shocked that he stumbled backward, colliding with something and falling down. When he turned to look, it was the ticket seller, now in a twisted state, with arms and legs contorted from the impact, yet still saying, "Welcome, please enjoy your visit." He began to feel a shock from what he saw, and screamed in terror. Behind him, the eyes of various stuffed creatures were staring at him. In the end, he was dismembered by those creatures, half of his body sewn onto his wife's body, in a gruesome manner, amidst the sounds of all those creatures. The Overseas Festival. The story begins at a festival in Japan, where 2 close friends, Ayako and Miki, are enjoying various attractions, whether it's the cotton candy stall or the goldfish scooping booth. Ayako expresses her desire for them to stay there forever, feeling excited and amazed as they encounter new stalls along the way. Ayako notices a mask stall in front that catches her interest, so she rushes over without waiting for Miki. When she turns back, Miki has disappeared. She complains to herself, "Where did Miki go?" and tries to shout for her, asking, "Miki, where are you?" Suddenly, she hears a voice responding, "I'm over there," coming from one of the hanging masks. She turns to look in the direction of the sound, which seems to be coming from the mask, but everything appears normal, leading her to think she must be imagining things. Surely no mask can talk. Suddenly, a green light slowly approaches from the other side of the festival, accompanied by the sound of bells, and something moaning from afar. When she looks toward the source of the sound, the crowd that was once bustling around has completely vanished. Upon closer inspection, it resembles a typical parade, but this parade is led by countless spirits, and among the things being paraded is a large head with a wide mouth that moves back and forth, frighteningly laughing softly as it goes. The spirits chant repeatedly, "Go over there," causing Ayako to feel almost faint, her legs giving way as she collapses to the ground. She tries to gather herself, and runs as far away as possible, eventually reaching the goldfish scooping stall, exhausted. She asks the old man running the stall if he has seen her friend, but he doesn't respond, and slowly turns to her, with a face that has transformed into a large goldfish with bulging eyes, terrifying her. Ayako screams, and runs to the cotton candy stall she had visited earlier, asking the old man there if he has seen her friend. This time, the old man doesn't turn around, but Ayako sees him sticking out a long tongue, wrapping it around a clump of cotton candy. Ayako nearly loses her mind, and runs out, encountering terrifying ghosts and spirits along the way, as she shouts for Mickey. Then, a voice calling Ayako echoes from behind her. When she turns to look, she sees Mickey, who has gotten lost along the way. Mickey grabs Ayako's hand and says, "Let's hurry." Ayako runs after Mickey and asks, "Where are we going?" Mickey stops and replies, "We're going over there," and her face suddenly turns inside out, resembling the masks from the festival. Ayako's scream then echoes throughout the festival. The story takes place in the middle of the night at the Koshinya camping site, where 3 students, Yamato, Taichi, and Osamu, are gathered together chatting while the other friends are all asleep. Osamu suggests the idea of going to play on the girls' side, but the other 2 friends feel tired and sleepy, saying that the girls are probably not much different, and have likely been asleep for a long time. They joke that it's impressive to not feel sleepy at this late hour. After a while, Osamu admits that he also feels sleepy, but lately, he has been having terrifying dreams that make him afraid to close his eyes. Hearing this, the other 2 friends can't help but laugh, thinking it's childish to still be afraid of nightmares at their age. Their laughter echoes loudly, prompting Osamu to tell them to be quiet since the other friends are sleeping. He realizes he made a mistake by sharing his dream with them. Taichi then apologizes and asks what Osamu dreamed about. Osamu recounts that in his dream, he was sitting in a classroom with all his friends, including Taichi and Yamato. He doesn't remember what they were learning, but it must have been something very fun, because everyone in the room was laughing non-stop, making him wish to be with his friends like that forever. However, suddenly, there was a sound of a door opening from the back of the room. Something walked in, and he didn't know what it was, or who it was. It seemed that no one could close their eyes, or even move to turn their heads to look at it. It walked behind them and kept laughing. Osamu, feeling scared, tried to remind himself not to look back and to keep his gaze forward, absolutely not to turn around. Suddenly, a large hand grabbed his head and slowly twisted it to look behind him bit by bit. At that moment, he tried hard to resist, and told himself not to look, thinking that if this continued, he would surely see it. He realized he had to do something, and just then, he jolted awake from the dream, saying he had been having this dream all the time, which was why he was afraid to sleep, because he feared the dream. When the 2 friends heard Osamu's story, they felt that it was indeed quite scary. They reassured him that he didn't need to be so afraid, because after all, it was just a dream. The three of them then went their separate ways to sleep. In the middle of the night, Taichi suddenly woke up because he felt the urge to urinate. When he thought about what Osamu had told him, he immediately felt scared, to the point that he didn't dare to go to the bathroom. While he was hesitating about what to do, he heard a rustling sound, and when he looked towards the source, it was Osamu, who was sleepwalking, moving his hands and head. Suddenly, he smiled, making Taichi wonder if Osamu was having a nightmare like he had described. Before the doubts could fade, sound of Usamut's neck bones cracking along with his head caused his face to twist, and his eyes bulged out due to the pressure from the twist. Tai was shocked by the sight, and tried to call Osamu. At the same time, the heads of the other friends who were sleeping began to shake, and slowly twisted one by one, until all the friends in the room looked like they were in a state of horror. Tai wondered what was happening, or if this was the dream that Osamu had mentioned. Suddenly, a hand came to twist his head backward slowly, and at that moment, he couldn't close his eyes, or move. He told himself not to look, absolutely not to look, but since he couldn't close his eyes, he saw everything from the beginning. He saw the figure of a woman, thin with long hair, a distorted face, and a head twisted so much that her eyes bulged out. Additionally, the arm that was holding his head was muscular, with bulging veins and a pale appearance. Hina doll. The story begins one midnight when a group of students, consisting of Haruo, Nobuko, Kengo, and Yumi, wanted to test their courage by ghost hunting in an abandoned house. When they arrived at the door, they found it ajar, suggesting that someone might have entered before them. Haruo used a flashlight to lead everyone inside. As they walked down the hallway of the house, they discussed the history of this abandoned place, mentioning that the family who previously lived there mysteriously disappeared, and that there were also rumors of debt issues. They entered a room that contained a shrine and a shelf of snow dolls, which are decorated during the girls' festival in Japan, believed to ensure the health and happiness of daughters. This festival is sometimes called the Girls' Festival, and it is said that the Hina doll protects people from misfortune by taking it upon itself. But it seems that this abandoned house once had a girl living in it. Nobuko wondered why, if these dolls were supposed to help and protect the people in the house, the family still disappeared. At that moment, Yumi noticed that one of the Empress dolls was missing. Nobuko suggested that it might have been taken by someone who entered before them, wanting to try it out. They all still wondered why only the Empress doll was taken. Meanwhile, they felt an indescribable eerie sensation spreading around them, and both of them mischievously thought about taking a doll home as well, laughing at the idea. They then encountered a staircase, and decided to go up to check the second floor. But before ascending, they felt something frightening in the area. After they went up to the second floor, they entered a room and encountered 3 mirrors. Haruo said that this house was indeed suitable for them to test their courage, but he suggested Nobuko look into one of the mirrors. She refused, because she knew that according to belief, one of the mirrors would show the face of the deceased. Haruo then said, "Okay, then let's all look together." They walked in and opened the mirror, which was almost impossible to see through due to the thick dust. He remarked that if they couldn't see anything, it shouldn't be scary, and he brushed the dust away. Suddenly, the door in the mirror creaked open, startling Haruo, who turned to look at the real door behind them, which remained closed. He told everyone that he saw the door in the mirror open. Haruo pretended to be brave, but he was actually scared and might have imagined it. He told her to be quiet and look back into the mirror. At that moment, Nobuko saw something in the mirror that made her stand in front of it, and what she saw was the door in the mirror fully opened. Looking back at the real door, it was still closed, and when they turned back to the mirror, they noticed the ghost of the Hina doll appearing in the door, causing everyone to be terrified. The ghost of the Hina doll moved in from behind and was larger than a person before leaning towards Yumi. Feeling scared, Yumi turned her face away from the mirror, but in the reflection, she had already been taken. Haru shouted for the ghost to stop as she cried for help, but the ghost abducted her and closed the door. When everyone turned to look, Yumi was still standing in the same spot, but she was in shock and collapsed. The three of them were in a state of extreme fear, prompting Nobuko to urge them to escape, leaving Yumi behind. However, on their way down the hallway, they encountered Yumi in the shrine room, looking as if she had been thrown onto the Hina doll shelf, and her face and eyes had transformed into those of the Hina doll. Suddenly, a shadow approached them, and when the three turned to look, they came face to face with the real snow doll ghost that was not in the mirror. The fourth person. The story takes place at a high school. After class, two female students are chatting with a teacher who has just finished teaching about the hand-grabbing human. She asks if the teacher knows this tale, saying that there are strange people who stand by the road at night, and when they see someone passing by, they try to reach out their hand to ask for a handshake. The teacher responds that it sounds very scary. The girls continue to explain that if someone refuses to shake hands, the hand-grabbing human will say that they are a bad person and will punish them by turning them into a lump of meat. Moreover, there isn't just one hand-grabbing human. They also mention that one must never shake hands with the fourth hand-grabbing human. The teacher asks what would happen if someone accidentally shakes hands, and she replies that it would bite off their hand. As they recount the story, they still feel scared by the horror tale. Meanwhile, Riko, who has cleaning duty that day, learns about this story indirectly before she goes home, thinking that they are really foolish to believe in such superstitions. At Riko's house, while she is sitting and reading a book happily, her sister Naomi comes in and knocks on the door. She tells Riko that she forgot her homework notebook at school and would like Riko to take her to get it. When the two of them arrived at the school, the atmosphere was eerie and silent, prompting Riko to say that the school at night is really scary. She suggested that they quickly get the notebook and go back home. After finding the homework notebook, the two quickly turned around, but Riko jumped in shock when she encountered a figure standing still, making no sound. They then told the figure that they had forgotten something, were about to leave now. On the way back home, Naomi asked Riko why she was so startled when they encountered the figure earlier. Riko replied that anyone would be scared if someone suddenly stood silently behind them. After a while, they encountered a strange shadow in front of them that slowly moved closer. Riko began to sweat due to the stories she had heard about the hand-grabbing human, and she stood still for a moment. However, it turned out to be just a drunken old man. She then muttered to herself that the hand-grabbing human must just be a rumor. But after walking for a while, a large man suddenly appeared, standing with his head down and extending his hand, while saying, "Shake my hand." Naomi told Riko to hurry up, but at that moment, Riko heard a voice in her head about the hand-grabbing human, saying that if she refused to shake hands with them, they would turn her into a lump of meat. So she reached out and shook hands with him. He then grinned and told Naomi to hurry and not to look back at them. Riko felt very scared. On the way, she encountered a police station and thought it would be safer to have the police take her home. However, as she approached, she encountered a hand-grabbing human in a police uniform, extending his hand to ask for a handshake. With no choice, she shook hands with him and thought to herself that this was the second one. Both of them then tried to run for their lives, but still, there was a hand-grabbing human disguised as an old man, blocking their way, causing her to panic and fall down, before he reached out to ask for her hand again, making her shake hands with the third person. She then hurriedly ran on, because their house was just ahead. Rico reached her hand back, for Naomi to hold on to, so they could quickly run into the house together. But suddenly, Naomi disappeared. At that moment, Rico was confused and didn't know what to do. She tried to shout for Naomi, because she was afraid her sister would encounter the fourth one. The voice in her head told her not to shake hands with the fourth one under any circumstances. Then, she heard a voice calling for Naomi, along with a hand reaching out to grab her. When she turned to look, she saw her sister running towards her, but in front of her stood the fourth hand-grabbing human blocking the way, and importantly, it had already grabbed her hand, for it opened its mouth wide and elongated, ready to bite her hand. Carousel. The scene opens at a shopping mall, where the boy Shinichi and the girl Satomi have stopped by the amusement zone. Satomi mentions that she misses the times when her mother would give her money to play here, while waiting for her mother to finish shopping and pick her up. Shinichi remarks that it's surprising to see people still playing at this late hour. She suggests they play a ride before heading back. Suddenly, a clown appears behind them and cheerfully asks if they want a balloon. Satomi jumps slightly and thanks the clown for the balloon. Meanwhile, there is an announcement from the mall that it is about to close, which disappoints Satomi, as she intended to play a ride before leaving. The clown then suggests if she would like to try the carousel, mentioning that only those holding red balloons can ride for free. Satomi's eyes light up with excitement at the thought of riding the carousel, and she tells Shinichi that they should go ride it. However, Shinichi declines, saying she should go ahead and play while he waits to take pictures. She said okay, and walked up to the carousel, passing by the ride operator, who had a lifeless expression. Shinichi shouted to her not to sway too much, or she might fall, as he was worried she wouldn't have fun. At that moment, there were still a couple of children riding the carousel, but he noticed that both of them looked quite unhappy. The carousel then started, and as it made its first round, Satomi shouted to Shinichi, asking if he was watching her. He replied that he was, reassuring her. Shinichi thought to himself that he hadn't seen her have this much fun in a long time. As the carousel made its second round, she shouted again, asking if he was still watching. He answered that he was, but this time the ride began to sway more violently, making Shinichi secretly worried that she might fall off. Meanwhile, the children riding alongside her started to act strangely, smiling with eyes that began to look frightening. But on the third round, she shouted again, asking if he was still watching her. This time, Satomi began to act strangely. She swayed back and forth, made a grimacing face, her eyes bulging in different directions, and her mouth hanging open in a frightening manner, not even holding onto the carousel pole. Shinichi started to feel that something was off, and he got goosebumps. Suddenly, a group of people and staff in mascot costumes walked in. At that moment, the signal indicating that the carousel had finished its round sounded. He looked at the carousel, but Satomi had already disappeared, leaving only the two children still riding. He tried to shout for Satomi and asked the ride operator if he had seen the girl who just rode, wondering where she had gone. The operator replied that he didn't know or see her. Shinichi then walked over to the carousel, where she had been sitting, and asked the two children about Satomi, but they also said they didn't know or see her. Shinichi began to feel uneasy, and suddenly the carousel started spinning on its own, while the people standing around the carousel began to clap their hands. For some unknown reason, a hand reached out and grabbed Shinichi When he turned to look, he encountered a terrifying-looking carousel horse that spoke, asking, "Shinichi, are you watching me?"